Have you ever watched someone dismantle a person's entire career in under 60 seconds, without raising their voice once? I have. And I want to tell you about the day Marcus Webb walked into the Harrington Grand Hotel in downtown Toronto, wearing a faded Carhartt jacket and work boots that still had dried mud on the soles, and left having ended a man's livelihood, exposed a decade of silent abuse, and changed the lives of 3 people who didn't even know his name. This is the story nobody at that hotel wanted told. Marcus Webb was 41 years old, Indigenous Canadian, a man with dark eyes that seemed to absorb a room before he said a single word. He stood 6 feet tall, but carried himself with the kind of stillness that most people mistake for smallness. He had callused hands from years of working outdoors before he built the company that now bore his name. He kept his hair tied back. He never wore a suit unless someone else's contract required it. His one luxury was a battered leather notebook he carried everywhere. The same brand he'd been buying since he was 22 and couldn't afford anything else. On a Tuesday morning in late October, Marcus drove himself to the Harrington Grand in a 10-year-old Ford pickup. He had a meeting at noon. A quiet meeting. The kind where pen meets paper and numbers with a lot of zeros get signed into existence. He arrived 90 minutes early because Marcus Webb was always early. He walked into the lobby. The Harrington Grand was the kind of place that made you feel its opinion of you the moment you stepped through the door. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings with gold leaf detailing. A floral arrangement in the center of the lobby that cost more per week than most people's grocery bill. The staff were trained, meticulously, ruthlessly trained, to sort guests by appearance within the first 3 seconds of contact. Marcus Webb, in his muddy boots and Carhartt jacket, did not sort well. He crossed the lobby toward the lounge area, where he intended to sit, order a coffee, and review his notes before the meeting. He didn't make it to the lounge. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind the concierge desk, sharp, clipped, the kind of voice that had perfected the art of politeness as a weapon. Marcus stopped and turned. The man standing behind the desk was Colin Greer, 53 years old, the Harrington Grand's senior front-of-house manager, a pale, narrow-shouldered man with silver hair combed, so precisely it looked laminated, and a smile that never once reached his eyes. Colin Greer had worked at the Harrington for 19 years. He had outlasted 4 general managers, 2 ownership changes, and approximately 160 complaints that had somehow never stuck to his record the way they should have. He looked at Marcus the way people look at something they've found on the bottom of their shoe. "Can I help you?" Colin said. The words were polite. The tone was not. Marcus looked at him calmly. "I'm waiting for a meeting. I'll be in the lounge. The lounge is for registered guests and members." Colin stepped out from behind the desk, which was a deliberate choice. A territorial move. "Do you have a reservation with us?" "I don't need one. I have a noon appointment." Colin tilted his head just slightly. "A performance of patience." "With whom?" "Sanderson Capital. They've booked the private dining room." Something shifted in Colin's expression then. Not belief, exactly, but a recalculation. Sanderson Capital was a name the Harrington staff knew. The firm had been holding quarterly events at the hotel for 6 years. But the recalculation didn't land where it should have. Instead, Colin Greer looked at Marcus's jacket, his boots, his absence of a briefcase or a lanyard or any of the props Colin associated with men who had appointments with firms like Sanderson Capital, and he decided his first instinct was correct. "I'll need to verify that," Colin said. "Go ahead," Marcus said. Colin didn't move to verify anything. Instead, he said, and this is the part that the 3 other staff members in that lobby would later describe in their written statements, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside while I make some calls. We have a reputation to maintain." The lobby went quiet in the particular way. Lobbies go quiet when something wrong is happening and everyone can feel it, but nobody wants to be the one to name it. Marcus looked at Colin for a long moment. His expression did not change. He did not flush with humiliation, or raise his voice, or do any of the things Colin Greer was accustomed to people doing when he applied this particular kind of pressure. He simply said, "You want me to wait outside, just while I verify, in October, outside." Colin straightened. "I don't make the rules, sir. I enforce them." Marcus nodded once slowly. He reached into the inside pocket of his Carhartt jacket and pulled out his phone. He didn't dial anyone. He didn't say anything else. He walked, calmly, unhurriedly, to the bank of chairs near the lobby's east wall, the ones technically outside the lounge's designated boundary, and he sat down. Colin Greer watched him do this with visible irritation. Then he turned and went back to his desk. That was his first mistake. His second came 4 minutes later. A young woman named Sophie Tran, 26 years old, Vietnamese Canadian, a junior concierge who had been at the Harrington for 8 months and who had been trying in those 8 months to find the right moment to say something about the way Colin Greer operated, watched from her station near the elevators. She had seen this before. She had seen Colin do this to a black family with children last spring, telling them the pool was closed for maintenance when it was not. She had seen him do it to an elderly Filipino man who turned out to be the guest of honor at a corporate dinner. She had filed 2 internal reports. Nothing had happened. Sophie watched Marcus sitting in the chair with his notebook open on his knee, writing something, unbothered, and she felt a kind of specific dread. The dread of someone who knows exactly where a situation is heading and knows they've been powerless to stop it before. She was about to find out this time was different. At 11:47, 2 men in tailored suits came through the Harrington's main entrance. They were representatives from Sanderson Capital, and behind them, walking with the easy authority of someone who owned the air in whatever room they entered, was Diane Fournier, 60 years old, white-haired, the managing partner of Sanderson Capital's Western Canada division, a woman who had been doing business in this country for 35 years, and who had personally requested that today's meeting be held at the Harrington. She had personally requested it because she had specifically requested that Marcus Webb be their guest. Diane Fournier scanned the lobby the way she always scanned rooms, professionally, completely, missing nothing. Her eyes found Marcus sitting in the east wall chairs before she'd taken 10 steps inside the door. She crossed the lobby to him directly. "Marcus." She extended her hand. Marcus stood, shook it. "Diane, good to see you. I hope they've been treating you well." It was a polite thing to say, a standard thing to say. But there was something in her eyes, a question that was reading the room even as her mouth made small talk. Marcus said nothing. He simply picked up his notebook and fell into step beside her. And then Colin Greer made his third and final mistake. He came out from behind his desk again. He moved to intercept them, not Diane, not the suited men from Sanderson Capital, but Marcus, stepping into his path with a smile that had now calcified into something almost grotesque. "Sir, I was actually just about to come and speak with you. I wasn't able to verify your appointment, so I'm going to need to ask." Diane Fournier stopped walking. She turned and looked at Colin Greer with the particular stillness of a person who has operated at the highest levels of Canadian business long enough to recognize exactly what she is looking at. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was very controlled. "What exactly weren't you able to verify?" Colin, to his credit, or perhaps to his catastrophic miscalculation, did not immediately understand what was happening. "Ma'am, it's standard procedure. We ask that unaccompanied visitors who are not registered guests." "This man," Diane said, "is Marcus Webb." She said it the way you say a name when the name should be its own explanation. "He is the reason we are here today. He is the person we are meeting with. And I personally confirmed this reservation with your front desk 3 days ago and requested that Mr. Webb be given full guest privileges upon arrival." The lobby was entirely silent now. Colin Greer's face did the thing Marcus had been watching for. It moved through several stages very quickly, confusion, recalculation, and then, beneath the professional composure, something that looked a great deal like the beginning of fear. I apologize, Colin said. There may have been a miscommunication. There was no miscommunication, Diane said. I'd like to speak to your general manager. Now please, before our meeting. Ma'am, I'm sure we can resolve this. I'm sure we can too, she said pleasantly. That's why I'd like your general manager. Sophie Tran, from her station near the elevators, later said that she had to press her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. The general manager was a man named Robert Ashfield, 48, who came down from the third floor in 11 minutes and arrived in the lobby to find Diane Fournier standing with her arms crossed and Marcus Webb sitting once again in the east wall chair, his notebook open, writing something, a cup of coffee that Sophie had quietly brought him sitting on the side table. Robert Ashfield knew exactly who Diane Fournier was. He also knew, because he was the general manager of a hotel that did $40 million in annual corporate event bookings, and he made it his business to know exactly who Marcus Webb was. Marcus Webb was the founder and sole owner of Northmark Infrastructure Partners, a Calgary-based firm that had spent the last 12 years quietly, building one of the most significant portfolios of Indigenous partnership resource projects in Western Canada. He was, as of that October morning, in the process of finalizing a development partnership with Sanderson Capital worth, at first close, $180 million. With projected expansion over 5 years, that number climbed to somewhere north of $400 million. The Harrington Grand Hotel was Sanderson Capital's preferred venue for every significant signing event, every board dinner, every client reception they held in Toronto. Robert Ashfield understood the mathematics of this situation in approximately 4 seconds. He looked at Colin Greer. Then he looked at Diane. Then he looked at Marcus, who had not stood up, who was still writing in his notebook, who had still not changed his expression. Mr. Webb, Robert said, crossing the lobby, I want to personally apologize. Marcus looked up. He said simply, you can save it. Not cruel, not loud, just final. He stood up, tucked the notebook back under his arm, picked up the coffee, and looked at Diane. Should we go up? We should, Diane said. They walked to the elevators. Sophie Tran pressed the button for them. As the doors opened, Marcus paused and turned back to look at the lobby. Not at Colin, not at Robert, just at the lobby for a moment, the way you look at a room you know you're about to change. Then he stepped inside and the doors closed. Behind him, Robert Ashfield turned to Colin Greer and said, in a voice that was very quiet and very cold, 4 words, come to my office. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. In that time, Marcus Webb and Diane Fournier's team worked through the final terms of the Northmark-Sanderson partnership, a deal that had been 18 months in the making, that would fund 3 major infrastructure projects in northern Alberta and 1 in northern Ontario that would employ over 1,200 people across 4 provinces, the majority of them from First Nations communities. It was, by any measure, one of the most significant deals Sanderson Capital had closed in a decade. When the papers were signed and the hands were shaken, Diane Fournier walked Marcus to the lobby herself. This was not something she typically did. Her assistant usually handled this. But she walked him down and across the marble floor toward the door, and as they crossed the lobby, she paused near the concierge desk. Colin Greer was not there. He would not be there again. Robert Ashfield had suspended him pending investigation by 12:30 p.m., by 4 p.m. that afternoon, following a review of the internal complaints that had been filed, 2 by Sophie Tran, 3 by other staff members over the previous 4 years, all of which had somehow been quietly redirected away from HR. The suspension became a termination. Diane Fournier did not say anything to Robert Ashfield about this directly. She didn't have to. What she did do, before she left the building, was speak to him for approximately 8 minutes near the concierge desk. About the Sanderson Capital account, about how important the venue relationship was to their Toronto events calendar, about how they were currently reviewing their preferred vendor list. Robert Ashfield listened to every word. Later, He would tell his deputy that it was the most quietly terrifying conversation he had ever had in a professional setting. The Harrington Grand did not lose the Sanderson Capital account that day, but it came close enough that Robert Ashfield spent the next 3 months personally overseeing front-of-house staff training, personally reviewing every single historical complaint that had been filed and not acted upon, and personally calling Sophie Tran into his office to tell her that her 2 reports had been found, that they had been deliberately suppressed by Colin Greer, and that effective immediately she was being promoted to senior concierge with a significant pay adjustment and his written apology. Sophie cried in the elevator on the way back down. She had spent 8 months wondering if reporting meant anything. Now she had her answer. Marcus Webb, for his part, went back to his hotel, a different one, across the city, where he'd been staying since Sunday. He called his daughter, who was 14 and deeply unimpressed by her father's general stoicism, and told her the deal was signed. She said, "Cool, can we get ramen tonight?" He said yes. He did not speak publicly about what happened at the Harrington. He did not post about it. He did not call a journalist. But 3 weeks later, when a reporter from the Globe and Mail was working on a feature about Indigenous business leaders in Canada and reached out to Marcus for comment, he sat for a 2-hour interview and said, among other things, the thing people don't understand about being underestimated is that it's not occasional. It's continuous. It's the cab that passes you. It's the waiter who seats you at the back. It's the hotel lobby where someone decides, based on your jacket, what kind of person you are and what you're worth. And you have 2 choices every time it happens. You can let it hollow you out, or you can let it sharpen you. I chose a long time ago that I was going to let it sharpen me. I was going to build something so undeniable that the jacket wouldn't matter. And I don't say that as a success story. I say that because I'm still angry. We shouldn't have to build something undeniable just to be treated like a human being in a hotel lobby. That part hasn't changed. That part still needs to. The article ran on a Saturday. By Monday morning, Marcus had received over 400 emails. He read every one. I've been thinking about this story since I first heard it, and I keep coming back to one moment. Not the signing, not the termination, not the 2-hour meeting upstairs. I keep coming back to Marcus, sitting in that east wall chair, writing in his notebook, with the coffee Sophie brought him. Because here's what I find myself wondering. What was he writing? Was he angry? Was he composing something devastating to say to Robert Ashfield? Was he drafting a complaint, planning a public statement, calculating his response? I don't know. But I think about the fact that when Diane Fournier walked in and asked if he'd been treated well, he said nothing. He just picked up his notebook. He let her read the room herself. He let the truth of what had happened be visible without narrating it. He trusted that quiet was enough, and I think that is the hardest kind of strength there is. Not the kind that fights back loudly, the kind that stays still, the kind that knows with absolute certainty that it doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, because the proof is coming and it will speak for itself. I've known people like Colin Greer in my life, people who sorted the world by surface and thought they were being discerning, people who had convinced themselves that their cruelty was professionalism, and every single time, the thing that undid them was not a confrontation. It was a quiet, inevitable consequence they never saw coming because they'd spent so long looking at surfaces that they forgot to look at what was underneath. If you've ever been Marcus Webb in someone else's lobby, if you've ever been told to wait outside, to go around back, to prove yourself before you're allowed to sit down, I want you to know that this story is for you. Keep the notebook. Keep writing. Keep building the thing that doesn't need to announce itself. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Leave me a comment. I read every single one, and tell me, has this ever happened to you or to someone you love? Have you ever watched someone get underestimated and then get to watch that underestimation unravel? I want to hear it. Hit subscribe if you're new here. Every story on this channel is about the same thing. Really, what people are capable of, and what happens when they're finally seen. I'll see you in the next one.